The wreckage falls onto the parking lot of a car dealership. A brand new lot, full of electric vehicles, the kind of cars the world has been told are the future. The helicopters hit the ground and within seconds the parking lot is on fire. Not the quiet, containable kind. Lithium-ion batteries ignite differently from anything else. When they go, they release gases so toxic that firefighters arriving on scene have to change their entire approach to the blaze. They will later say that the surrounding residential buildings are lucky the helicopters didn't fall 100 meters in any other direction. 20 cars burn. The fire takes a long time to put out. When investigators begin pulling what they can from the wreckage, they find 6 people dead. One of them is an American singer from Santa Cruz, California, who was 32 years old, who was in the middle of a world tour that was supposed to cover 30 nations and 70 concerts, and who, exactly 2 months before he died, sat in front of a camera dressed as Shrek and calmly explained exactly what should happen to everything he owned after he was gone. His name was Oliver Tree. And the story of how he ended up in that parking lot in Rio starts a very long time before that Sunday morning. Oliver Tree Nickel was born on June 29, 1993, in Santa Cruz, California, to parents who were not like other parents. Both of them had careers as traveling circus performers. In the years before Oliver turned 12, the family lived inside a mobile motorhome, moving constantly across the country, sleeping in a vehicle lined wall to wall with musical instruments. By the time Oliver started formal schooling in Santa Cruz, he had already been taking classical piano lessons for 9 years, had been writing original compositions since he was 4 years old, and claimed to have written a complete album before he started first grade. Most kids with that kind of early musical exposure go on to study music in a traditional conservatory and become session musicians nobody outside the industry ever hears of. Oliver Tree went in a different direction. His teenage years in Santa Cruz were marked by something that would later define everything he made, a deep, painful isolation. He didn't fit easily into school. He didn't move through social groups the way other kids did. Instead he found 2 places where he felt like he belonged, music and extreme sports, and he threw himself into both with the kind of intensity that usually only exists in people who have nowhere else to put their energy. By his mid-teens he was a competitive kick scooter rider. Corporate sponsorships followed. He was competing across California while simultaneously writing and producing music in his bedroom under pseudonyms nobody outside a small local scene had ever heard. He was building 2 careers at the same time, and the rest of the world had no idea either of them existed. Then came the Burning Man incident that at 20 years old, Oliver attended Burning Man, the annual festival in the Nevada desert. He took acid. Something went badly wrong. He would later describe it as nearly dying, an experience that cracked something open in him and redirected every creative impulse he had. He quit what remained of his drug use. He threw himself entirely into music. Within a year he had signed to a London-based record label, released a debut EP called Demons, and gotten his cover of a Radiohead song personally approved by Tom York, the lead singer of one of the most critically respected bands in the world. He was 20 years old and had barely started. He eventually transferred to the California Institute of the Arts, studied music technology, audio engineering, cinematography, and performance composition all at once, graduated in 2016, and within weeks of graduation released a song called When I'm Down with a DJ named Wet Hand. It went viral across streaming platforms almost immediately. Atlantic Records called. He signed. And then he built something that nobody in the music industry had ever quite seen before. The persona he created was called Turbo. A bowl cut so severe it looked like someone had placed a mixing bowl on his head and used scissors. Wraparound sunglasses. Oversized jackets from an alternate universe version of the 1980s that nobody actually lived in. Baggy pants. A customized oversized scooter he rode on stage and in music videos. He performed his own stunts. For the music video to his debut EP's title track, he spent 5 months at a motorsport track in California learning freestyle monster truck jumping so he could do it himself on camera without a stunt double. He broke several bones over the course of his career doing things his label's lawyers almost certainly asked him not to do. He later said the whole aesthetic was a kind of armor. His teenage isolation had taught him that vulnerability in public was dangerous. So he built a character so aggressively absurd that people could never quite tell when he was being sincere and when he was performing. The answer, usually, was both at the same time. His music hit differently because of that tension. Songs like Alien Boy and Hurt and Life Goes On were about loneliness, rejection, not belonging anywhere, the specific pain of wanting to be seen by people who had already decided not to look. The visuals were cartoonish and theatrical and sometimes genuinely funny. But underneath all of it was a real person writing about real things, and enough people recognized that to make him one of the most streamed alternative artists of his generation. Life Goes On has over 460 million views on YouTube. Miss You, a collaboration with a German producer, has nearly 400 million more. He recorded his final album, Love You Madly, Hate You Badly, across 80 countries on 7 continents over 2 years. He launched his own independent record label. He was, by any reasonable measure, at the highest point of his career when he flew to Brazil for his world tour in June 2026. And now we arrive at the part of this story that nobody who has covered it quite knows what to do with. On April 24, 2026, 7 weeks before he died, Oliver Tree appeared on a podcast called The Zach Sang Show. He showed up to the interview dressed as Shrek. Skin painted green. His signature half-mullet bowl cut visible above the costume. No explanation offered for the outfit. He was there to talk about his new album, his tour, his career. At some point in the conversation, the topic turned to what would happen to everything he had built after he was gone. What he said next was not the kind of thing artists usually say in press interviews. He said he believed that none of the wealth his career had generated actually belonged to him. He said he had structured his will so that when he died, his family would receive nothing from his professional earnings. Not his parents. Not future children if he had them. Not a future wife. He said he would make sure any children he had got through college, but that was the ceiling. He had set up a foundation called Dr. Oliver Tree's Art Grants for Baby Geniuses, designed so that the interest generated by his music after his death would flow directly to emerging artists to fund the physical act of creation. Not education. Not equipment purchases. Hiring people. Renting gear. Actually making things. Then he said something that, in hindsight, lands like a stone dropped from a great height. He said that when he died, his art would go up in value. He said people would finally appreciate what he had made. He said that was just how it worked, that appreciation for an artist's work arrives after the artist is no longer there to receive it. He did not say it with bitterness. He said it with the calm of someone who had already made peace with a fact most people spend their entire lives refusing to look at directly. 51 days later, he was gone. The call that confirmed his death came to his father, Jesse Nickel, from a music producer in Brazil who had been working with Oliver in the days before the crash. His father's response to press inquiries was 4 words. Peace be with Oliver. His ex-girlfriend, the singer Melanie Martinez, wrote publicly that she had been unable to function since hearing the news. She wrote that he was the kind of person who made people around him laugh without trying to, that he was genuinely, deeply committed to his art in a way that most people in the music industry only perform being committed to theirs. She said she hoped he was already scheming up his next project somewhere. The host of the podcast where Oliver had talked about his will, Zach Sang, wrote that he was still trying to process sitting across from someone a few weeks ago and then being told that person was gone. He said Oliver Tree was one of one. There is no better summary of what he was. On the morning of June 14th, Oliver Tree was on his way somewhere. He had performed in Sao Paulo on June 6th. He was not scheduled to play again until July 1st in Lisbon, Portugal. He had more than 3 weeks between shows. He was in Rio for music, for the people he worked with there, for a city that had drawn him in the way cities that are beautiful and dangerous in equal measure tend to draw people who run toward both things at once. He did not know. There is no evidence, no hint in any message, any interview, any behavior in the days before the crash, that Oliver Tree had any sense of what was coming. The Will interview was not a premonition. It was a 32-year-old man who had thought seriously about mortality in the abstract and had already done something about it, which puts him ahead of most people twice his age. He had looked at the question of what he would leave behind and answered it cleanly, and then he had gone back to his world tour and his new album and his next show and his next idea. He had 70 concerts planned. He made it to 1. The foundation exists. The committee he described will vote. The music will keep generating money. The streams will keep climbing, the way they always do after someone is gone, the way he predicted they would, calmly, dressed as Shrek, 7 weeks before a Sunday morning in Rio changed everything. He was 32 years old. He was 17 days away from his birthday. He had just released what he called his most personal album. He had just started something that should have run for decades. The sky above Rio de Janeiro is still full of helicopters. The investigation is still running. The fire that took 20 cars with it is long out. And somewhere in the architecture of whatever comes next, there is a foundation with a strange name and a stranger set of rules, waiting to give money to artists Oliver Tree will never get to meet, funding work he will never get to see, exactly the way he wanted it. That was always who he was. Loud on the outside. Completely, devastatingly sincere underneath. Rest easy, Oliver.